I'm Sophia, the CEO of MycoWorks. MycoWorks just got done with the IndieBio 4-month accelerator program, and I want to tell you a story from the first day at IndieBio. So on the first day, all of us co-founders had to do this icebreaker group exercise where we got into a circle, we closed our eyes, we each had to think of an animal, and then we opened our eyes and we had to act out that animal. The second instruction we got was that we then had to, in that group, decide who was the leader and start to follow that person and to imitate their animal until we were all in unison. So I decided for myself that I was going to turn everyone into raptors, birds of prey. And I knew exactly how to do it. I knew that I could do a really simple movement that the shy people would be able to emulate, and that I could use eye contact and vocalization to convert the other people who are maybe feeling less certain or less committed to their choice. So I was able to do this because I made myself visible in the group. I had to be visible to a key number of people who could see me and follow me, and then we would turn into a critical mass that others could join. But this was also an exercise about looking and seeing and communicating. And I got everyone to follow me because I did all those things. So being seen is difficult for some of us. I think it's why we love dancers. That's their job. Their job is to let you see them and to see them fully in their effort, their strength, their skill, their talent, and sometimes their mistakes. So part of my story is that I'm a dancer. I'm comfortable with movement exercises. I'm comfortable with leading movement. Sometimes with dance, if it's presented in the right way, it can be an invitation to join, an invitation to participate, to be bodies in formation moving together. So on this day at IndieBio, I was looking around at my fellow Raptor colleagues, and I was thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did I get to be leading a group of biotech entrepreneurs in an experimental group bird dance? I was raised by two research scientists. My dad did research at Rockefeller University and then at Mount Sinai Medical School. He did pioneering research in oncogenes and cancer-causing retroviruses. My mom did her PhD in microbiology, and she ran a lab at NYU Medical Center. She was working on a mouse model for a genetically inherited autoimmune disorder. So despite the fact that I grew up in a house with scientists, I myself was obsessed with art and literature. I grew up going to libraries, reading poetry, fiction, and plays, and going to museums, looking at art from around the world, from cultures all around the world through the history of time. And I followed these passions to Columbia, where I did an undergrad degree in visual arts and English, and I continued on to do a PhD in English literature at UC Berkeley. So in a lot of ways, this was my own path, but in some ways, it was still my parents' path. My dad had done his PhD at Berkeley, and my mom had done her postdoc at Berkeley. So you try really hard to not become your parents, and somehow you still do. So in between the time I started at Columbia and finished at Berkeley, a few key things happened, life-changing things. One, in 1998, my last year at Columbia, my mom died. She was the pedestrian in a traffic accident in Taipei. Around 10 years later, when I was writing my dissertation at Berkeley, I started training and performing as a dancer. And around the same time, I started working with an artist named Phil Ross, who was doing work at the intersection of culture, nature, and biological materials. So these are the foundational events that led to me being the head of a biomaterials company, leading a bunch of biotech entrepreneurs in a group experimental bird dance. And I'm going to start with my PhD in English to explain how this happened. So I got my PhD in English because I wanted to understand the power and structure of epics, the great origin stories that cultures all around the world have told themselves about their great achievements, their foundational values, their heroes, and their speculative futures. I was interested in the way that stories can shape and change the world. But the PhD was a struggle for me, and maybe it was because I had been raised by these two scientists who were applying their research to better understanding cancer and diseases that affect all of humanity and individual lives. I couldn't shake the feeling that the research I was doing wasn't going to have that kind of material impact on people, on the world. At the same time, the intense intellectual work that I was doing was starting to feel more and more materially detached from the material conditions of the world, even of my existence and my body. It was hard to be in my head all the time. So my drive to feel material connection with the world and with myself led me to dance. As I was writing my dissertation, I started taking ballet class, and I got obsessed. I would take like 2 or 3 classes in a day and then go back to my desk and work on my dissertation. I was really interested in learning all I could about the full range of dance languages: ballet, modern, contemporary, contact improv, West African, you name it. This rigorous physical training became a really crucial complement to my intellectual training. It was the material grounding that I really needed. So I did this for a couple years. One day I ran into a really good friend in dance class, Frantes, and he said, let's start a dance company and start performing. And I said yes. I knew that as an adult who had started training in dance in my 30s, there was no way that I was going to ever professionally perform unless I made it happen for myself. So we started a dance company. We started dancing and performing all around the Bay Area. We did the Berkeley Art Museum, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, galleries in Oakland, and it was great, and it was also terrifying. I'd been a really shy person for most of my life, and I was convinced that on stage performing, everyone could see everything, my limitations, the fact that I hadn't trained in dance my whole life. I didn't have the technique that you would have if you'd started dancing when you were a kid. And I was ashamed and afraid, and I still wanted to do it, and I did it anyway. So as I kept doing it and enjoying it, I came to understand that like beautifully trained dancers, my performance could be received as a generosity as well. So in being willing to perform and be seen as a pedestrian, not a virtuoso, with the limits and the extent of the training that I did have, I was offering something to anyone who's ever recognized that feeling of not being enough or not being perfect, or knowing that you've taken an unusual path to where you are today, and feeling self-conscious about that being visible to people. So I'm doing this dance and performance, and I'm doing my dissertation, and around the same time, I take the opportunity to intern with an artist named Phil Ross, who has just entered the room. And Phil was doing really interesting work at the intersection of nature, culture, biological materials. He was growing sculptures out of mycelium, which is the root fibers of mushrooms, and he was calling it mycotexture. So Phil was curating and putting together an exhibit and series of public programs at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts right here, and it was called Biotechnique. Biotechnique was an exhibit on the history of biotransformation as a technology that's intrinsic to human culture. This exhibit showed, for instance, publicly for the first time ever, a piece of lab-grown muscle tissue alive in a bioreactor at Yerba Buena. It showed these beautiful images, X-ray images of frogs that had developed mutations, multiple legs, multiple arms, multiple heads, as a result of environmental pollution. It showed ancient Greek amphora vases used to age wine. As part of this exhibit, Phil and I co-produced a skill-sharing art science fair called Technobiotics, where there were demos on everything from how to bake bread, how to ferment kimchi, how to clone plants, you name it. So a full range of biotechniques. So this was in 2007. This was about a year after the Maker Faire had just launched in 2006 in San Mateo County. And DIY, hacker culture, and horizontal learning across design, fabrication, craft, engineering was taking off. It seemed like everyone I knew had a kitchen garden, or was learning to knit, or was brewing their own beer. Biotechnique and Technobiotics situated biotechnology in an historical and cultural context. It told the story of how biotechnology is foundational to both our living and built systems. This was a really important story for me at that time. After the project ended, Phil said, stay tuned. I'm starting to get incredible invitations from the most interesting people and institutions around the world. And sure enough, 2 years later, 2009, Phil designed and built the first ever mycotextural structure. It was at the Kunsthal Dusseldorf in Germany, and it was a tea house built entirely with bricks made from mushrooms, which over the course of the exhibit were shaved down into a tea to serve to visitors till the entire structure had been consumed. 3 years later, Phil comes to me. I'm finishing up my grad program, and he takes me to a really nice dinner, and he says, listen, this mushroom material can be and do anything, and I think that we can make anything with it. Do you want to help me make this happen? It was a remarkable invitation. It was an invitation to make an incredible material impact on the world, and I said yes. At that time, I was finishing my dissertation. I was dancing regularly with my dance company that I'd started with Brontes. I had just auditioned for and gotten cast as a dancer in a piece by a really well-known artist that was going to be at the Berkeley Art Museum for the first 3 months after I was graduating. And on the home front, my dad had just founded a company that had developed a mushroom-based health supplement that has been shown in animal trials to reduce tumor growth and in clinical trials to support non-small cell lung cancer patients through remission and recovery. And his company was gaining traction. So here comes Phil with this invitation to start this company that's going to change the way that the world makes things. And it's based on mushrooms, just like my dad's company. And here are these invitations to dance and to get paid for it. So that is how I started a biomaterials company, but also a professional dance practice, and started supporting my wild biomaterials dreams with my dance day job, which is like the inverse of the typical balance of the wage labor creative practice balance, right? So for a while, I had trouble explaining to myself and sometimes to other people why these choices made sense. Why was a person who'd come from art and humanities now doing biomaterials and biotech? And why was someone in biomaterials and biotech finding so much power and resources in the performing arts and dance? It was a hard story to tell. One day I was going for a walk with my godmother, my auntie, the woman who'd been my mom's best friend for her entire life. And she told me that one thing that my mom had wanted to do that she'd never gotten to do was to learn to dance ballet. I had never known that. And another thing that she had wanted to do at the time that her life ended was to leave her scientific research, what she had gotten her PhD in, to do, and to start a business. So somehow I was manifesting my mom's dreams, and somehow between my dad and me, we had 2 mushroom startup companies in the family. So you try really hard to not become your parents, and somehow you still do. I still struggled in those years. When I was starting to dance and perform and starting to figure out how to build this biotech company, I really wrestled with the idea of opportunity cost and wasted resources. You know, I'd put so many years into a PhD in English literature, and I really wanted to find a way to make that training and that resource relevant and important for the role that I was stepping into. When I was starting Indie Bio, I reached out to a fellow female co-founder as I was stepping into the role of CEO of the company, and I asked her for advice on how to feel prepared and how to think of the path that I'd taken to where I was. And she had a really good insight. She said that a CEO is essentially and ultimately a really good editor. A CEO has to learn how to tell her company's story so that people understand it and that people know how to help you. So that was a seed to help me think about how my training in literature and how stories are told and built could actually serve me, that could help me tell the story of MycoWorks and tell my own story. Early on at Indie Bio, I got another piece of good advice. I was at birthday drinks for Ryan, one of our program leads, and I was talking to Ron Shigeta, who's our science lead. And Ron and I were talking about the division between our public and our private lives in the positions that we're in. And he said that one of the hardest things about being a CEO is that you have to be absolutely visible in what you want, what you value, what you believe, what you're building, and what you need. And he said, it's actually quite vulnerable to do this. And at that time, it was early in the program, I had this reaction. I was like, well, I'm not gonna let people in this space see the real me. I'm gonna protect that for myself. And I think it came out of the same fear of being seen or judged that I felt when I was starting to dance, seeing that I had taken an unusual or unconventional path to where I was today and not being sure how that would be received, feeling self-conscious about it. And I sat with that feeling for a while. In dance class, if you're not getting corrected, that's a bad thing. That means your teacher isn't seeing you. It means you're not commanding attention. It means you're maybe repeating mistakes and not learning from them. So in dance class, if I would go to class and I wouldn't get corrected, I'd go home and I'd resolve to come back the next day and be more visible. At Indie Bio, if you didn't speak up and share your problems and ask your questions, you didn't get the help that you needed. You needed to be seen and heard to fully participate, to fully benefit. So as time went on at Indie Bio and my journey since then, I've come to see that what Ron said is actually really true. To step into this role as the head of a company is to become extremely visible, and you have to be, because you need to be able to tell the story of your company and how you're going to shape the world. I believe that MycoWorks is going to do some incredible things because, like me, we're coming to a realization that we have all the resources we need in this world. We just have to discover new ways of using them. For me, that meant turning to the path that I'd taken. I have all these resources. They come from a really wide range of places. Through my parents' immersion in the understanding of the world as a living biological system. My study of literature and stories, how they're built, how to tell them. My creative practice as a performer, how to choreograph, how to move bodies, direct people, information. And of course, as Alex referenced, and I totally agree with you, the amazing material resources and privileges I've been given to take the risks that I have. You don't get to be a dancer or an entrepreneur without a lot of resources supporting you. MycoWorks is doing a similar thing in the sense that we are taking an abundance of resources, the world's carbon-based waste, agricultural, lumber waste, green waste, biofuels waste. We're converting it with mushroom mycelium to create an organic biomaterials platform. We are making materials for the world from everything that grows under the sun. So like me, MycoWorks has all the materials that we need. We are just transforming them and discovering all the new ways to use them. Thanks.